for joining us today for this webinar on the Mobile Source Emissions Reduction Grant. And this is the How to Apply webinar. It'll be followed up with a Q&A towards the end. So a few housekeeping rules before we get started. All attendees will be muted during the webinar. Questions can be submitted in the Q&A box down in the corner, and they will be addressed during the question and answer time if not covered in the presentation. The raise hand feature will be disabled until the question and answer time and will only be considered for those who called into the webinar by phone. For those calling in, pressing *3 will raise your hand, and pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit their questions. Also, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on the DAQ website at a later date. Finally, we have 1 hour scheduled for this webinar, but if we are able to complete everything and answer all the questions with time to spare, then we do have the option to adjourn early. If we are not able to answer all the questions by the end of our time, we will let you know how to get your questions to us. So with that, I will now hand it over to Sheila Blanchard for today's presentation.
All right, thank you, Matthew. I'm Sheila Blanchard. We're going to go through how to apply for the Mobile Source Emission Reduction Grants, and then have a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. I'm an environmental program consultant for the Division of Air Quality and the DERA grant administrator. So let's move forward. So what can you expect in this presentation? So a couple of weeks ago, we had an overview of the grant program, which included the kinds of projects that could be applied for, the kinds of projects that were funded, the sorts of information that we might need in those applications, the entities that were eligible. So if you have questions about those sorts of things, you're welcome to ask them at the end of this webinar, but they are addressed in the previous webinar that we had that is now posted on our webpage. But I will do a brief overview of the program. We're going to talk about when and how to submit your application. We're going to talk about the attachments and the information required for a complete application, how these applications will be evaluated and how they're scored, and then where you can find more information after this workshop. And then finally, at the end, hopefully we'll have 10 or 15 minutes left to answer your questions. So just a brief timeline of the request for proposals that was issued on October 15th, 2024. It's on the website right now. I would recommend that you download that RFP because everything that we talk about in both of these webinars can be found in that RFP, including what kinds of projects can be funded, all of the links that we have included, and then the funding levels as well as the dates. So the RFP is basically your Bible for the program. So this webinar is in addition to that RFP. Okay, so the application is currently open. And so everything that we talk about today can be done as soon as today, if you like. The application will close on December 31st, 2024. You may notice that that is New Year's Eve. So that will tell you a lot about how many folks are going to be on staff to help you if you decide to wait for the last minute. In saying there will be none, probably. So it's really in your best interest to begin working on these applications now. And that's part of what this webinar is here to do, is to guide you through the actual application system, because that tends to be what hangs people up when it comes to applying for these grants. So get those in before December 31st. I'd recommend a month early, maybe at the end of this month, to make sure you get some back and forth with us if you need to make your application stronger or give us more information. We'll evaluate those applications at the beginning of the year, January, February, depending on how many we have. That's usually dependent on what kind of competition there is. If there's fewer applications, we'll get through them a lot faster. You should be notified of your application status, whether you've been awarded or not awarded, by March 2025. We hope to have contracts ready to go and processed April and May of next year. And then for all of the projects that are funded under this RFP, All work should be completed by September 30th, 2026. So about a year out from when contracts are processed. And that would include submitting all invoices for reimbursement, your certificate of destruction, and final reports. All that should be submitted to us in the GMS by September 30th, 2026. For this round, we have a little over 1 million in available funds. It's about 1.08, which is a little less than last year. We had more states participate this year, so that's why the funding is a little bit lower. For this webinar, you should already have an NCID. An NCID is required to request access to the GMS. Access to the GMS is required to apply for any of the grants that are coming through the Division of Air Quality right now. The NCID is pretty much a universal ID for a lot of the applications. If you work for the state already, you have an NCID. If you've already submitted an application to any of our grant programs, you have an NCID. And some county level and metropolitan organizations will also may have an NCID. So if you already have an NCID, you should use that one. But if not, you will have to get an NCID in order to request access. Additionally, at this point, we would love it if you had already requested access to the GMS. This is something that can take some time. There's humans on the end of this that are going through all of these applications and filing all these applications, which is something that can take time, especially over the holidays. So you will request access to the GMS, and then you'll log into the GMS to submit your application. We'll go through a little bit of this a little bit later in the webinar. And finally, we do have a deadline for the last day that you could still apply for one of these grants. The last day that you could be granted access and still have plenty of time to apply is December 9th, 2024. And finally, we will not accept late applications. When the GMS closes, the GMS closes. And it will close at the very end of this year at 11:59 New Year's Eve. So just quickly an overview, the DERA, the mobile source emission grants are funded by DERA. These are largely diesel equipment upgrades and replacement. This is a reimbursement program, which means that you will do the project and then give all of the required paperwork to receive reimbursement. So that upfront money is necessary for you to complete the projects. There are mandatory cost shares for almost all project types. This means that when you are doing a replacement project, you are required to pay a certain proportion of the cost of that project. This is a DERA requirement, so an EPA requirement for this program. And we'll talk a little bit about the cost shares a little later into the presentation. So that cost share has to be met no matter what, and it's usually a percentage of the total cost. Finally, the diesel equipment that you are replacing must be scrapped, and it must be scrapped within 3 months of taking delivery of the new equipment or putting the new equipment into service. If it's something like an on-road application that needs tags, things like that, it would be within delivery or putting the equipment into service. And scrappage is a very specific process, and I'll talk about what that looks like too. There are some important criteria when you're looking at your fleet and looking at what kinds of vehicles would be eligible for replacement. One, we replace like for like. So the vehicle or equipment that you would like to replace should be the same weight class as the new equipment that you buy. We do accept lower class to replace heavier class, but you can't replace with a larger piece of equipment than what you're scrapping. All vehicles that you submit for consideration for replacement must have at least 3 years of useful life. This can be the amount of life actually left in the engine, whether or not you would sell it or not sell it or keep it. So it's going to be until you expect for that engine to be retired and never be used again. And finally, this is a North Carolina specific requirement. All original equipment or vehicles must be operational in the previous 2 years. So you should be using it in the duty cycle that you are putting on your application. And the replacement equipment and vehicle must be operated at least 70% in North Carolina for the next 5 years. So this is so that North Carolina and the North Carolina funds, that we get the benefits of these replacement projects, which is really at the heart of the DERA program. Okay, once again, how to apply. You must have that NCID. If you have an NCID, you skip to request access. And then once you have that NCID, there's a couple of things that you have to do. And one note, the links that are present in this application will be, if you download the presentation to your computer and then go into presentation mode, actually you may just be able to open it from the website into presentation mode. The links will be live and you'll be able to follow all the links here, like this enterprise, this external access request application, the email, the W-9 link, the EBS portal. So all those links become live. And so you can just go through the application and go straight to the things that you need. So the first thing you'll do is the Enterprise Business Services Access Request application. You're going to put NCDEQ Division of Air Quality. I'm going to show you what that looks like on the next slide. You're going to complete an NC Substitute W-9. This is a different form than the federal W-9. It has North Carolina state information on it, and you're going to use the tax ID of the organization on the behalf of which you're applying. You're going to send that W-9 when you fill it out to this email, DAQ Mobile Source MSCB NCDAQ grants at deqnc.gov, just as an attachment. And they're going to link that with your application, the access application that is submitted via the website, and then get you into the system. Once you're in that system, you'll receive a welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System. And that means that you're able to get in the GMS. That means you're able to start an application. You're able to view your applications. And finally, we use the GMS throughout all processes of these grant programs. So not only will you use it to, if you do get awarded a grant, you'll use it to get access to the agreements and the contracts, as well as you'll use it to submit a grant or submit a reimbursement claim once the project is done. So you're never going to be rid of the GMS once you get awarded and are in the system. In that email that they send you, there will be a link to the NC EBS portal. Additionally, there's a link here that you can use, and also on our webpage for the mobile source grants, there are some useful links there that will get you to the EBS portal. And finally, just to note that this can take some time to get processed. As we get closer to the deadline, I know a lot of people like to wait to the last minute to do their homework, but I would really recommend you not do this, because as more and more of those folks are requesting access, it takes a lot longer in order to grant that access on behalf of the system. Once you are in the GMS, there is an application form that you have to fill out completely. And then there are a bunch of attachments that you have to attach in order to be considered to have a complete application. The first one is linked here is the NCDAQ vehicle spreadsheet. That essentially asks for the information of the vehicle that you want to replace, as well as what you intend to replace it with. And this information that we get from the spreadsheet is what we put into the emissions calculation, the DEQ, diesel emissions quantifier from EPA, in order to get your emissions benefits from these projects. So it's important that all of those fields for the replaced vehicle are filled out so we can get those emissions benefits from these projects. You will be buying new equipment or retrofitting or repowering old equipment. So anything that you're trying to do should include itemized quotes for all of the new equipment. You should talk to your vendor, find out how much these are going to cost to replace. We need pictures of the original equipment. the engine tags and VINs. A lot of this is because there are different words for different kinds of off-road or heavy-duty equipment. And so this gives us an idea of what you're replacing, as well as it helps us look at the engine tags to look at those tier levels of the engine that will be scrapped and things like that that help us keep in compliance for the program. Finally, you would upload any required supporting documentation for the application. This might be something from your city council that is allowing for you to buy a particular equipment, or a letter from Duke Energy that supports your application, anything like that as supporting documentation for your application. And finally, if you want to do an electric or an EV request, there are a few extra attachments that are required for those kinds of projects. So that would be the first thing you're going to want is an acknowledgement of consultation with the utility. This may be a letter from Duke Power. This may be a letter from your on-site electrician. This can look like a number of things, but usually it does look like a letter from Duke or from the energy provider with which you'd be working for these EV projects. Additionally, you're going to need quotes for the infrastructure. If you are requesting infrastructure in your application, you don't have to, but we do fund up to 45% of infrastructure costs for EV projects in tandem with the vehicle that it will be charging. Most infrastructure quotes include installation costs as well as the equipment costs. So finally, as a result of a couple of the new legislature that has come down from the federal government, all infrastructure that is funded through federal grants like DERA must be Buy America, Build America compliance. There are a lot of companies that are stamping these on their products. So unlike last year where we didn't have a ton of places to send people for these infrastructure, there are now some folks that have these BABA compliant chargers and things like that. Additionally, we ask for an acknowledgement of workforce development for EV projects. This is simply an acknowledgement that you won't displace any non-EV workers, or that you plan to train folks in maintaining your EV equipment or your infrastructure. And actually, funding for that is available through this program. We're not totally sure what that looks like because we haven't funded anything like that, but if there's something that you want to do, I urge you to give me a call, and we can talk it through and see if what you want to do is fundable. And finally, any other supporting documentation for your application. This is the landing page for the GMS system on the right here in the Enterprise Business Services. That username is going to be your NCID. That password is going to be the password that you created when your NCID was created. And then once you're in the system, you get that letter, you can log on, and it's going to take you to the first page. We do have some user manuals as well as a whole page of GMS information. This is by far can be one of the trickiest parts to navigate about our application system. We tried to make the application fairly easy, but getting into the system can be a bit of a hiccup. So there's a lot of resources that these links will get you to if you need help there. All right, so once you're in, this is essentially the first page that you're going to see. You might see a tile that says air quality, but this is the first page that you see, and this is the GMS system. Just for your information, under web links, we do have the DAQ training library, which will walk you through the steps for creating an application, for creating a claim, for viewing your application, for viewing your agreements, all those things. So those are essentially modules that will walk you through how to do all of these things, because they're all a little bit different, but they're all a little bit the same. So there's some resources there in case you need it. The first thing you're going to see is, if you want to submit an application, is create new application. So you're going to go to this link. It's going to take you to the next view. And if you just push search, you don't have to put anything in the search criteria. if you just push the button search, it's going to give you all of the applications that you could submit right now. So I believe the only one that's open right now is the 2024 DERA application. So that'll be the only thing that pops up. In a couple of days, when our infrastructure program opens up, you'll see a link to that too. So you're going to want to go to the DERA application. And this is what that looked like. So when this person went into the system and pushed search, these are all of the programs that were open that they could apply for. So what you're looking for is going to be the FY 2024 diesel emissions and then the DAQ grant application. And the NCDEQ number here is going to be 19. So it's our 19th open application. So that's what you're going to be looking for. And like I said, if you go and start your application now before the infrastructure program opens up, that will be the only thing that you can choose. This is the landing page for the application itself. So as you can see up here in the bar, these are the various components of the application. So we're going to ask for information about the project. We're going to ask for information about your contacts, the budget, your project details, and then at the end, whoever is doing the application has to certify that the information that's contained in this application is true. And then you'll be able to submit your application once you complete all of these tabs. And we do have buttons, these check, save, and close, and next on each of these sections. So at any point you can check to see if this project is complete, if this is completely filled out, or you can save and close and return to your application later. So what we're looking for, these are the same things that are going to be on your NCW9. The organization here is going to be your organization. The project title is going to be the name of your project. Most people say Metropolitan Organization EV Project or something like that, or Diesel Reduction Project, something like that. The tax identification for the organization with whom you're applying with. The program type, this should be DERA EMA 10. You should put DERA in this only, like, so the EMA 10 is what this will look like. And then the number of vehicles will be the number of equipment or engines that will eventually be scrapped at the end of this, or the number of vehicles that you intend to replace. And then the eligible application type, this will just be contingent upon whether you're a private entity or a public entity. And then the project type drops down, and that's actually asking for whether it's an EV project or if it's a low NOx project, something like that. So if you have any questions about this, just feel free to give us a call and we'll walk you through what needs to be in here. The rest of this is the project location. So this isn't where you as an entity are perhaps established or organized. This is going to be where the vehicles are going to be doing their duty cycle. And it's possible that this could be a multi-county project, but what we're looking for here is probably where you store most of your vehicles or the most number of the vehicles in this application. Right, so that's where this is going to go. And to get that latitude and longitude, you can just go onto Google Maps and it'll give it to you. Finally, we have the contacts. Please fill these in. I would highly recommend you have different contacts. We use these contacts throughout the duration of the project. And so if someone leaves their posts, then sometimes these projects can get stalled because we don't have anyone to contact in order to make sure the project's going forward. So I would highly recommend that you put somebody different for each of these roles. And the first one is the authorized representative. This is who I'm going to send the contract and the award letters to. So this should be the person that is allowed to legally sign for stuff in your organization. The project manager is essentially going to be my direct line as administrator to you or to whoever you are. I assume most of the folks here are the project managers. You're going to be doing the GMS stuff. You're going to be uploading the quarterly reports. You're going to be you're going to be the person I call when I have questions about your application or about the project. So the project manager is exactly what it sounds like. It's the project manager for the whole grant. And then the financial contact, that's going to be whoever issues your PO, or you talk to about financial stuff. Sometimes these can be the same person, but like I said, I recommend that you give us at least 2 different contacts for our records in this project. So the next tab here you see is budget. In here, you're going to give us the total cost of the project, the total cost of any infrastructure that you want to add. I believe we added another line for other here in case you want to add project costs for workforce development. So those would go in there. And then the requested funds are how much you are asking for, and this should match the cost share percentage that is in the project type that you have applied for. It won't let you put in anything that is over or under what it calculates as your cost share. So, and this is important. So if you're doing multiple types of replacement projects, say you're doing an EV project and a diesel project, those are going to have to be separate applications, because these our applications just can't really do those calculations for the different cost shares. So anything that has a different cost share in your project type, you should do a separate application for each of them. The matching funds are what your organization is going to add. This should meet the cost shares that are required in the mandatory cost share portion of the RFP. Other funding is any anticipated other funding that you may receive for this project. And then we have a line over here to tell us where that other funding is coming from. If you see here in the budget, we have a link to the vehicle spreadsheet. This is going to link you to our NCDIQ spreadsheet, which will give us vehicle or equipment level information. And that's how we're going to score these projects, is at the single vehicle level. So you may have 10 or 12 vehicles, and we'll score all of them, and that's where we're going to get the information for the diesel emissions quantifiers from the spreadsheet. This should be overall the entirety for all of the vehicles or equipment that you'd like to replace. Just to give you an idea of the funding levels that are available for DERA, like I said, if it's an engine that takes diesel right now, it is likely eligible for replacement under the DERA program. The funding limits depend on what you would like to replace with. For instance, and this is generally the rule, zero tailpipe emission power sources, DERA will pay up to 45%. You go to low NOx, we're looking at 35%. You go to diesel, we're looking at 25%. We do pay 100% on some of the retrofits, like the remanufactured systems, the idle reduction control. These have a lot of rules attached to them. So if you have questions about that, we should probably chat before you submit an application. Additionally, yeah, these other retrofits, similarly, there's some rules about the years that can be replaced. A lot of those projects aren't really eligible because a lot of the vehicles that those could happen on have already been upgraded and have already been retrofitted. And then the rest of these get kind of complicated. We do have electrified parking spaces. We have shore connection, locomotives, marine. So really, if it takes diesel, we could probably replace it. Okay, so now we're in the project details section of the application. And this is where you're going to give us a couple of essays, or I would say long answer about your project. So the detailed description of the project is: how many vehicles are you replacing, or equipment? What kind of equipment are you replacing? Where does it operate? What kind of equipment are you buying to replace it? Things like that. So how this request fits into the diesel emissions sort of goals. This is gonna tell us whether you're in a goods movement facility, or a port, or a rail yard, things like that. This is basically telling us what kind of emissions benefits we should expect to get out of your project. Number 3, what is the likelihood that the project will incentivize future indirect NOx and other emissions reductions. So if you have already started a transition of your fleet, say to CNG or to EV, this is where you would put that. Or if you have plans in your business plan to become zero emission at some point or net zero, this is where you would tell us about your organization, your entity, about how this fits into an already existing plan or the beginning of a plan to reduce NOx or emissions in your fleet. Number 4 is if there are any societal co-benefits of the projects. This might be that your rail yard is next to school. I don't think there's a lot of those, but things like that. Like, are there any special cases that this project will affect? Are we looking at school buses, at charter schools, something like that? So this is where you put any information that is related to that. And then finally, and I didn't take a screenshot, there's a fifth and sixth question. The fifth question asks about project feasibility. This is where we want to know that you as the project manager or whomever is the project manager has the knowledge and the skills and the support to carry out this project. So this is where you would talk about how you have the technical and procurement and financial capability to execute your project should it get funded. And then the sixth square is not required. That is basically, is there anything else that you would like to tell us about your application or about why we should fund you? It's really kind of where you make your case. We use these long answers because we do get a fair number of projects that are similarly scored. They have similar mitigation outcomes. But this is where we would add to our selection committee about sort of the differences between the kinds of projects or the kinds of vehicles that are up for being replaced. And so it gives us just a little bit more information. Okay, so there's a couple of places you can add an attachment. If you see up here, this is actually, if you scroll up in the application, you're going to get these blue sections underneath. And you can add an attachment really anytime during the application process. You can add it first thing before you even submit, before you put anything in the application form. You can add it after you submit. And really any time in between. You can add it when I call you on the phone and say, hey, we need this added to the application. So attachments can be added at any time. And when you go into your application, this will look the same, whether you're in a claim, whether you're in an agreement, whether you're in an application, you go to this attachment, and it's going to ask you what kind of attachment it is with a drop down, and then you'll have to find it, the file on your computer, and you can upload it just like you would add any applications to or any attachments to really any application. Okay, so we're finally in certification. You check the box, you type your name, your title, it will fill in the date. And so you could either submit if you're ready to go, right? You could push check here to make sure that you have all of the information that you need. And then you could submit. You are going to need to submit before that deadline. This is where the rubber meets the road. The submit has to come before December 31st, 2024. Okay. If you're not ready to go, if you're not ready to submit, if you need more information, you can just save it and close and return to it in the GMS. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. Right, so I just put this here. I would say 30% of the calls I get are from folks that just did not submit the application yet. It's still just in the system. I get a workflow notification that has been submitted. So really just make sure you get the submit box going. And if you can't submit, it's because there's something that hasn't been filled out in the application. Once you have submitted, it's going to tell you that it's saved your application successfully. You'll also get this if you get a saved, if you save and come back. This number circled here is the application ID. You're going to want to write that down somewhere. You could probably get away with just using the last 3 numbers there to search for applications. But yeah, you're going to want the whole application ID. That's going to be the application ID that we put on all of our correspondence that comes to you from here on out. And then finally, it's not considered a complete application until all of your required documents are there. And if you submit it early, a lot of us on staff are able to look at your application and just say, hey, it looks like you haven't submitted your spreadsheet. You're going to want to put that or it's not going to be complete. So the sooner you can complete the application, the more likely, or submit the application, the more likely you will have a complete and competitive application. Finally, we do have a checklist here for your required attachments if that's something that works for you. And you can attach files through here after you have submitted or after you have saved. So this is another place where you can attach those required documents. Once again, these required application attachments, the vehicle spreadsheet, the quotes, the compliance, all these will be uploaded into the GMS. These pictures of the engine tags, the VINs, the pictures of the equipment to be replaced, and then any supporting documentation. So this is what this vehicle spreadsheet looks like. This is what I have to send to EPA for all of the projects that we do. So we just copied and pasted so that we can use it for the applications. Notice that there are multiple sheets in the spreadsheet. There's a sheet for on-road projects. There's a sheet for off-road projects. There's a sheet for marine projects. There's a sheet for locomotive projects. And then there's a sheet for infrastructure if you want to fill that out with any EV replacement requests. So you're going to want to fill this out for whatever projects you're trying to do. The on-road is going to ask you a lot of things. Something like a group name can be whatever. The fleet owner is going to be the entity, whether it's privately or publicly owned. You should have all this information, the county, whether it's on-road, what kind of vehicle it is. These are drop downs. So you'll be able to choose from a drop down what fits your vehicle. The class, what it does, etc. The most important stuff that we really need, besides this county and this duty cycle county, and if you have multi-county projects, it's going to be the county associated with the vehicle that's in this Unit 1. Unit 2 may be a different county, so put that county in there. We need the VIN. And that VIN should match the uploaded VIN that you have put into your application, the picture, the vehicle make, the model, and the model year. All that is also on the VIN. That information should match. We also need a picture of the engine plate. So this will include the serial number, the engine make, and the model, and the year. So really, once you get your pictures, you shouldn't have a really hard time at filling out this whole column of information. Finally, the engine family name will be on there. The baseline fuel type will always be diesel, so that's always going to be the same. And then finally, one of the things that we need to calculate the emissions are going to be the amount of fuel used per year, the miles traveled per year, the idling. We can use defaults for that, and that's only for on highway. And then this is the remaining life. So this is how much life is actually in this engine. Can you run it for another 5 years, 6 years, 3 years? And remember, the least amount that you can put in here is 3 to be eligible for replacement. Underneath that, for each of these units is going to be your upgrade information. This is the vehicle that you tend to replace. And for the VIN, obviously you don't know that now. I fill this out when I send it to EPA at the end of the grant. So we're looking at 2024. This will probably be 2025, actually. You're either a replacement or a repower, what kind of fuel you're going to be used. So that's a specific. All these are drop downs. You won't have to come up with this. What class it is. So like I said, it should match the class that's in the replaced vehicle or be lower. And then this is your total cost for the replacement of that vehicle. So this will calculate what your cost share is for these funds. So that should be within the boundaries of what your required cost shares are, and what we can pay for that vehicle or for that equipment. You probably will not know this information, the model year, it should be probably a tier 4 final. I don't think we're selling anything that's not a tier 4 final. And then horsepower, what your intended horsepower, and all this you can get from the quote, right? And then the new fuel type. And then finally, this is going to be what your fuel savings are going to be for the year. So if you have an EV, it's going to be the total amount of fuel used, et cetera, et cetera. Usually we can back calculate all that from the information that you give us. All right, so you've uploaded your NCD, you have all that information ready to go to upload, you've uploaded it, and you want to check out you want to edit your application because you did a save. You didn't submit it yet, you just did a save, so you can go back. And how you do that is you go into edit application form. Okay. And this is also where you'll go if you get the application sent back to you. Say you do submit it and I look at it and I say, you know, the budget numbers aren't correct. I'm going to have to send it back to you. This is how you're going to get into edit how you're going to edit the application. So this is where you'll go to edit application. And then you can put into your application ID, that application ID that you wrote during the submit or during the save process. You can even do *853 and it will find it. You could probably actually just push search with nothing in there and it's going to pull up this application for you. It's really easy. So just in doubt, don't put anything in there and push search, and it will just pull out all of the applications that you have created. As you can see here, it says right now that the status is in process by applicant. This means that you can edit it or that we've sent it back for editing. This means that it's not submitted yet. Finally, if you have submitted your application already, you can go back and view the application. You won't be able to edit, but you can view what's in there. And so you do the same thing. Instead of going to edit, you go to view, and then you can put that *853 or type in the whole thing, or put nothing in there and search and do search and it'll come up. And then you can go to the link and you can view your application from there. If you view your application from there, that's where you can continue to upload documents if you need to. If we need to get, a BABA compliant certification, this is how you would go in and upload those documents to your application. Once again, adding attachments to a submit application, the same thing. You're going to push that attachment. It's going to ask you to choose a file off of your hard drive or off of your cloud drive, wherever you have it stored. You'll put some kind of name to it. It would be great if you named the attachment what it was. So if it is a picture of the VIN, VIN would be helpful. If it is a front picture of the vehicle, front picture would be fabulous. So a lot of times we could have applications that have 100 attachments, and having to download them and then rename them, that could be a little bit of a hassle. So if you can, you can add the metadata to that information and really help us out a little bit, help us out a lot actually. And that will be true no matter what. That's true. That'll be true for agreements should you get funded. That'll be true for claims when you want to get reimbursed. Is naming those files as what they are will really help us a lot. Just to give you an idea of how these projects will be scored, we have added a few criteria, but they're basically the same. We are looking at lifetime emissions reductions, and this will be NOx emissions reductions, and then lifetime cost effectiveness. So this is the ton of NOx that has been saved or reduced by the amount of DORA money that is being asked for. So if you're only asking for 10% of the cost of a vehicle, your cost effectiveness is going to be much higher than, say, a diesel for diesel project that is asking for the full 25%. So just something to be aware of. The co-benefits are the other emissions that are reduced. So some of those criteria pollutants include PM2.5, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, those other outputs that come out from the diesel emission quantifier. We have an environmental justice score that is based on the county that the vehicle does its duty cycle in. We have EPA priority counties. These are set forth by EPA. So they include Cabarrus, Gaston, Iredell, Lincoln, Mecklenburg, Rowan, or Ewan. These are Union. These are counties that have some air quality burden maintenance things. Historically under-resourced counties. I think I have a map on the next screen that a little bit down the road. So this, if you're in an under-resourced county, you get a little bonus 5 points. EVs, because they tend to not score as well in cost effectiveness, get a little bit of a bump to be competitive with some of those other projects. Minority or women-owned businesses get a bump. This is something that you're going to have to tell us in your application. We're not going to go searching on the internet to see who owns your business. So this could be included in those long answers that we talked about earlier. Goods movement facility, also the same. We're not going to go hunting to see if it's a goods movement facility. Please just include that in your application so we can allocate those bonus points the best we can. And then finally, one thing that we've added is the federal major disaster area proclamation. I believe that is after September 20 something. So if you are in that area, we will add those points to each vehicle to as bonus points to make up for some of the after effects of Hurricane Helene. So you may be asking yourself, what does a competitive application look like? Well, first it must be complete. Remember, we will not accept incomplete applications after the deadline. So if we're going through some back and forth, if you have some questions, I will help to work you to get this application complete so we get all of the information we need to evaluate. If we cannot evaluate some or part of your application, it will not be complete and it will not be competitive and it will not go on to the selection committee for selection. So just let's make sure that we can get these applications up to snuff well before that 31st cutoff. Finally, it should be cost effective to our other applications. These may include voluntary cost shares that you pay, which would be those over the mandatory cost shares required by the program. So this may be, so instead of asking for 25% of the diesel to diesel replacement, you may only ask for 15 or 18 or 20%. And other diesel for diesel, that will give you a competitive edge over other diesel for diesel vehicles. So that's one way that you can become more cost effective. Finally, the best scoring equipment from our applications have a couple of things. They get a lot of mileage and hours, hours for off-road equipment. So the mileage is first off, it has to be over 7,000. I talked about that in the first webinar, over 7,000 miles a year. And these tend to be the workhorses. They tend to get a ton of mileage. Transit buses can get up to 20,000 miles a year, things like that. And then they have a lot of useful life. So whatever that useful life looks like according to your retirement schedule for your fleet. Finally, there's a payoff or a trade-off depending on the age of equipment. Obviously, tier 1 and tier 2 equipment that was manufactured before 2006, 2005. Those are obviously very, I don't want to say dirty engines, but they are not as efficient and they do have quite a few more emissions than those tier 3 vehicles. So, but those older vehicles don't necessarily have as much useful life. So there's a bit of a trade-off here. Of course, some off-road equipment has a ton of useful life, no matter how old it is. So really kind of think about that. The best scoring equipment kind of has a lot of these criteria. And finally, the best applications also have a well-defined project scope and they fit into a larger sustainability plan. So that's where we're getting the information from those long answers that you're committed to this project, that you have folks in your organization that are on board, that you've talked about what this looks like for your future. So we look for those things too. This is the historically under-resourced map. So the counties that are highlighted here in blue are those that would receive those 5-point bonuses. Okay, So just a few tips and things to know. You can't increase your fleet size, so everything that we would fund have to have a replaced counterpart engine that is the same as the one that we have funded. So that's where the like for like comes into. And a lot the like for like is essentially the vehicle must do the same duty cycle. It is possible that you may want to use a different piece of equipment that's in the same class. So instead of a dozer, you can have a tractor or something like that. So that's acceptable as long as it's doing the same duty cycle, right? Finally, and there's no standalone infrastructure. Infrastructure is we can fund that as part of a vehicle replacement project, an EV vehicle replacement project. No standalone infrastructure. Make sure your budget information is accurate. We are taking the budget information from the spreadsheet. So on a vehicle level, those should be accurate. And obviously all of those funds in the spreadsheet across the row should add up to what goes in the application. We may partially fund our applications, and this looks like a few things. We may only fund a diesel to diesel up to 20% if we want to, or we may just fund a couple of vehicles out of your total project. This can look a lot of different ways when it comes to partial funding. We do look at those long answer essays to evaluate projects that score similarly. I'll say it just one more time. These applications must be submitted to our system by 11:59 p.m. on December 31st, 2024. We do need to wait to have an agreement in place and a contract in place before you can start work on these projects. So a fully executed contract must be in place to start work. And then if we get an application or a lot of applications that are, can be scored similarly, we may share your application with other agencies with similar funding opportunities if your project is not funded through our program. So that's a little bit of a bonus for y'all. And then finally, the GMS, anytime you do applications with DAQ, if you don't log in once in a while, your account will be inactive. So if you are funded and you submit and then you forget to log in and then you get that email that says you were awarded, you may not be able to get into your GMS to start uploading those the agreement paperwork that we asked for. So you should log in periodically to see to get into your account just to make sure that you don't have to request access again. And we also have a lot of labels on the application, so you sort of can see where the application is in the system. So you may just want to log in to look at that. And finally, an awarded proposal is not a fully executed contract. Okay, so to get a reimbursement, you've paid for everything, you've done your replacement, you've done your scrappage, you go back to the GMS and you're going to create a claim. And we usually have a claims webinar to help folks with this part of the process. There's also one on our webpage that was recorded a few years ago that is still useful. What you need to make sure you get that reimbursement. So all claims are submitted in the GMS. We require quarterly reporting from all grantees after contract is executed. We require site visits by the staff to see the purchased equipment. We're going to have to do that to just lay eyes on the new equipment. So you'll have to have somebody in place to show us to where the equipment is, things like that during business hours. We have to have that in place before you get your reimbursement. We can usually do that within 30 days of you kind of telling us that the project is over or the project has been complete. And then you have to submit invoices, the scrappage proof, the photos of new equipment, and final reports. We have checklists of all the stuff that you need to submit to get a claim. And finally, just to give you, scrappage is a very specific process for the EPA. You may recall we use this also in our Volkswagen programs. This is something that is likely to never change. It means that the engine is rendered inoperable, that it may be recycled for the steel content or some of the other things that are in there. This is something larger than a 3-inch hole in the engine block. So this is to guarantee that this engine can never be brought back from the dead. It could never be a zombie. So that's a very specific thing. We ask for the before and after pictures to show what that 3-inch hole looks like. Um, we also ask for the vehicles that this is that a chassis is a thing, or a central chassis, or a double chassis. This is we ask for visual proof that the chassis has been cut in half, the frame rails, and these should be cut completely in half. And then once again, and we look for pictures before and after for this. And you can do the scrappage anywhere. If you want to do it in-house, do it in-house. If you want to send it to the junkyard, send it to the junkyard, but you're going to need these pictures to get reimbursement. EPA will not let us reimburse you without these photos. And finally, you have 3 months to scrap your replaced equipment with then taking delivery of the new equipment or putting that equipment into service. And you will have to show, if you take delivery a couple months before you put that equipment into service, you are going to have to give us proof of the service begin time of that equipment, whether it looks like a registration tag, or if it was in the shop or something, to have things added on, which happens a lot with refuse trucks. These are some good pictures that we've had, and I would advise you to, when you do your scrappage, to make sure that you get us something that looks this clear. This is our 3-inch hole in the engine block. It's very clear that that's a hole in the engine block. That's obviously looks like it's with some kind of drill. And you can do this a lot of ways, blowtorch, whatever. We just are really looking for the clearness of this photo to make sure that this engine has been scrapped. And then finally, I don't think it gets much clearer than these chassis rail cuts. So we're looking, this is the kind of level of quality that we are looking for these photos when it comes to our destruction proof that EPA looks for. A few helpful hints: apply early. We will work with you as you submit your application to get it complete well before that December 31st deadline. There's a lot of holidays coming up, so plan accordingly. Once again, we won't accept those late applications. In fact, the GMS won't accept those late applications. And then you can always contact us anytime between now and when the application closes for specific assistance. Finally, you can get more information by you can send questions to DAQ Mobile Sources. You can also subscribe to our mailing list from that email. We have the downloadable GMS user manual. This will step-by-step show you with screenshots how to get through and do things in the GMS. The GMS is a different system. So if you actually have problems with the GMS itself, like an error message, or it won't let you log in with your NCID or something like that after access has been granted, you're going to have to go to EBS support. That's a different group that does more like the tech support when it comes to the actual the GMS itself, as opposed to the application. Finally, subscribe to our mailing list, get updates about everything. And then this is our contact information. I'm Sheila Blanchard, the DEER administrator for the state of North Carolina. We got Matthew Hoskins, who helps me out with that, and then Stephen Rice, who's the supervisor of the Mobile Sources Group. We're all available to assist you to get a really good crop of applications that will decrease emissions throughout North Carolina. And I think that's it. We have some useful links. This is kind of puts all the links in one place for your convenience. And then finally, I'm here to answer some questions if you have any.
All right, thank you, Sheila, for the wonderful presentation. Give you just a minute here to catch your breath, drink some water. I know it's approaching 3 o'clock, but if anybody has any questions, type them in that Q&A box down in the lower right-hand corner, and we'll try to cover as many as we can without going too far over 3. So we don't have anything currently, so I'm gonna pull some questions from webinars we've done in the past, just to kind of touch on some of the more common questions, frequently asked questions. Um, so one of these, I've had this asked for our Volkswagen program quite often, so I know this comes up a lot. So Sheila, once the old diesel vehicle is destroyed and they have provided photo evidence of the destruction, are they allowed to scrap the vehicle and keep the proceeds?
Yes, any proceeds that you receive from the scrappage of the vehicle are yours to keep. They don't have to be reported to us or anything like that. That doesn't go into any of our reimbursement process at all.
Right. So another one here, um, they ask, will we receive a submission checklist similar to how we did in the Volkswagen grant program?
Yeah, we have checklists for everything. We have checklists for applications. We have checklists for claims. We have checklists for agreements. So yes, there are checklists available on our website. Additionally, your grant administrator usually will send you a list of checklists during the application or the agreement or the claim process that you can refer to as well.
Right. So this is a question we had been asked in the past, and I kind of figured this would be a good one to go over again, just to make sure things are clear on this. Um, so they had asked if they lost documentation and records of their DR submissions due to a personnel turnover. They're wondering, how do they locate their prior NCID information?
Um, so if you have had a personnel turnover during the time of one of these grants, whomever is taking over the project is going to have to get access on behalf of your organization to edit and submit any applications that are already in the system. So you'll have to go through the NCID process, the submitting access request, and then submitting the W-9 that affiliates you with the organization, and then getting into the system. And then when you get in, it will allow you access to that application to edit. There's a limit of 3 individuals that are allowable for each organization. So if you're already up to 3, you're going to have to send an email to us at that Mobile Sources email and ask for someone to be removed, whomever is left to be removed, and then so that you could add somebody into the system to do that application. Is that answered the question?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that was exactly it. Um, so when talking about the older vehicles that are being replaced, how does one calculate the 3 years of remaining life? You know, they have to have a minimum of 3 years remaining life. How do they determine that and put it into their application?
Well, for the most part, remaining life is up to the discretion of the fleet owner. Usually, you know how long you use your vehicles, you know how long they'll last. It doesn't necessarily mean when you turn over the vehicles and potentially or the equipment and resell them on the reuse market. It's actually the moment when those engines are going to die. So when they stop chugging along is the end date that you can calculate for those engines. If you do put something in your spreadsheet that seems outlandish or out there, we are going to take the average age of the engine because we do have that data for various on-road and off-road vehicles. And then we'll just use the average age to and supplement that in the application.
All right, thank you, Sheila. And I suppose the last one I have here, um, is asking about the deadline to complete their whole project and get everything in within the terms of the contract. So what happens if the application is approved and the contract is signed, but the vendor or manufacturer of the new equipment experiences some production delays?
Well, we would like to avoid that if we can, but we do know that that may be unavoidable. We can grant extension deadlines for the DERA programs in general. That involves an extension to EPA for the state DERA program. So if the crop within the crop of applications that are funded in this year, if it looks like a few of them aren't going to be done on time by that deadline of September 30th, 2026, then the grant administrator will submit an early, I mean, probably in April or May of that year, to get an extension to the grant, the DERA grants for the state, and then we'll allow grantees to submit an extension request for each of those projects within that extension period. It's a very complicated, involved process. We would prefer if you could get those projects done by that September 30th deadline.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Sheila. And I believe that's all the questions we have for now. So we can go ahead and wrap this up. I do have to make a plug for our next webinar. That would be next Thursday at 2 p.m. We're hosting a webinar for our upcoming Volkswagen program for community and destination charging for zero emission vehicle infrastructure. So that is going to be another webinar on how to apply. Again, that is next Thursday, November 14th at 2 p.m. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Sheila, for the wonderful presentation. Lots of useful information there for sure. We're definitely glad to have this out there. All right, so thank you for joining us, and we will see you at the next one.